Colin. Incredibly grateful to be back here. This is where I found recovery, in the buzzing metropolis of Scotland. Sure, where do I begin? I haven't had a mood or mind-altering substance since June 3rd, 2012. And still today I've got a home group, which means I'll always have a home. I've got a sponsor that I've had for the last 9 years, which means I'll always have direction in my life. And I've got a service position, which means I'll always have a job. And then obviously the 12 steps, which allows me to experience all of that sober, you know. As far back as I can remember, I always thought I had the answers. As far back as I can answer, I didn't really think or know that there was any other way to live life other than based on making sure that I was feeling okay first. I never knew that was an abnormal way to live. I just assumed everybody else lived exactly the same way because I had no reference point to tell me otherwise. And I mean that as far back as I can remember. That was my primary purpose. I remember once, I'm from Benoni, so you'll have to forgive me. So I've got two problems. I remember going to grade 1, and the primary school that I went to had a uniform, and the one day I forgot my tie because you had to wear a tie. And I remember only realizing that as I was walking through the gates, and the moment I realized that I'd forgotten it, I was scared. I was fearful. I think if you had asked me when I came into recovery, are you a fearful person? I would have said to you, absolutely not. I don't think of myself as a fearful person. But in reality, that was how I lived my entire active alcoholism, was from a place of selfish, self-centered fear. But again, I didn't know that. I needed you guys to show me that. But I remember walking through the gate and feeling fearful and feeling overwhelmed. And I knew that the teacher at the time, I'll never forget, her name was Mrs. Buerta. In those days, if you did something wrong, you'd have to be called to the front of the classroom and you'd get hit with the ruler in front of the knuckles. And I knew that was coming my way. I knew I was going to get caught, and I kind of tried to slip into the classroom unseen to the back. And I remember the teacher saying, Josh, come to the front. And she said to me, where's your tie? And I said, we were robbed last night. And it's quite incredible, though, because I didn't know it at the time, but my first drug of choice was going to be dishonesty. And it would stick with me right until I came into recovery. Because I went from a place of feeling fearful and feeling scared and just not enjoying life, really. And the moment I told that story, everything changed for me. All of my fear went away, all of my anxiety went away, everything went away. All of the attention was on me. Because the teacher said to me, I'm really sorry about that, don't worry, you can go to lost property, you'll find a tie there. And then obviously I was the center of attention in the class as well, because everyone wanted to know, how we got robbed. And I embellished the story as I think most kids do. The problem was that when I got home, my mom asked me how my day was. And I said, no, everything was fine. It was a nice day. And my mom said, that's strange though, because we got a call from the headmaster to say if we need any support, please let the school know, because apparently we got robbed and they stole everything from us. The way I was brought up was if you were going to lie, then you would get a hiding. So my mom would say, okay, cool, go and get the belt. So I'd have to go and get the belt and then come back to her. And I knew whatever answer I was going to give, that was the amount of hidings that I was going to get. So my mom would say to me, so how many times have I told you not to lie? And I would say once. And then we'd have like a bit of a negotiation, and then I'd get, 6 or 7 hidings. And the reason why I share that story for me was because I didn't know it at the time, but dishonesty was my first drug of choice. Because it doesn't matter how heavy my consequences were or how many hidings I got. The consequences that I got for that lying paled in comparison to the fact that I just realized that I never need to feel fearful or full of anxiousness or full of anything I don't want to ever again. And that was going to be how I was going to live my life for the next 25 years, however you are, old in grade 1. But that was a powerful experience for me. And fast forward, I'll jump, all over. But fast forward, coming into rehab at the age of 29, I'm fearful again. There's new people, there's new places, there's new faces. I don't really know anyone. It's my first time in rehab. And somebody says to me, "So Josh, why are you here, and what do you do for a living?" And I just lie. I'm just dishonest. I told everybody I was a criminal lawyer, working on lots of cases, and a bit of a misunderstanding. I use it a little bit every now and again. For those of you from the house on the hill, the men's loo there is right next to the office, so you can actually hear everything that goes on. And I remember walking to the loo, and I overheard, I think it was Keith, saying, "We need to get family questionnaires for somebody." And I thought, "Oh shit, they do family questionnaires." So they're going to find out all of my lies. So I decided to get honest because I wanted to avoid all the consequences of being humiliated in Life Story. Because I cottoned on very quickly what happens on in Life Story. And if you don't tell the truth, it's all going to come out anyway. But like I said, I didn't know it at the time, but I grew up incredibly fearful. But again, I thought that's how everybody grew up. And that was just my experience. The way I sort of lived the majority of my time before finding my first drink was just to mimic everybody around me, really. Everybody around me seemed to be able to make decisions, know what they were doing. They seemed to be able to, go and do sports and stuff like that. Everybody seemed to have some kind of idea of what life was about, and I didn't. I really didn't. I've never felt that my entire life, like I have some kind of purpose and I know what I'm doing. And so all I did was just kind of take little pieces of everybody else's personality and take little pieces of everybody else's life and make it my own, because they seemed to know what they were doing. And I was always crippled with lots of fear. The first time that I found alcohol, because I always think it's an important thing for me to share, because it was important for me, was I was with my two best friends, Dave and Steve. Both of them turned out to be recovering alcoholics as well. And I remember us going to the bottle store and buying those vodka sachets. And I think we were at the age of about 14, 15. And I was, although I had never said this to anybody, I was always crippled with absolute shyness. I was incredibly quiet. I hardly spoke at all. My insides certainly were not something that I wanted anybody to see. I kind of wanted you to see me as someone who looked okay and felt okay. And the only way that I could do that was to come across as, although I was 13, the strong, silent type. But I was certainly not that. I was definitely incredibly fearful and quiet and didn't really know how to speak at all. And that all changed the moment I found vodka sachets. Like I said, it was with my two best friends, and the moment I started to drink, everything changed for me. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but I found a place that I tried to return to for the rest of my life. I've always wanted to return to that place, because all of a sudden I experienced life in a way that I'd never experienced life before. And all of a sudden I was loud, I was confident, I was making jokes, I was running around, and I was fearless. And I must just tell you, I will choose to feel fearless over fearful any day of the week. Any day of the week. I don't care what the consequences are to you, to the people around me, to my loved ones. I'll choose to feel fearless over fearful any day of the week. And I'd found my drug of choice. I'd found alcohol, and that gave me that feeling. I didn't know how fearful I was until I found how fearless I could be. And I don't want to go into too many war stories because all our war stories are the same. But how things sort of unfolded for me was I then lived the rest of my life only for me, based on my feelings and my thoughts. What I didn't know at the time was there were times where I wasn't drinking and there was times where I wasn't using. And what started to happen for me was I started to experience untreated alcoholism. I didn't know it at the time, and I started to go to my first psychologist because I was suffering from low self-esteem and a lack of confidence from a young age, together with some anger issues. And I was sent to my first psychologist at about the age 17. And I'm so glad that I went and saw her, because we both agreed it was certainly my father that was the problem. It was great. I could work with her. And it was great because she said, I'll never forget, she said to me, I wish your father could come into treatment because, he's obviously the one that's got lots of issues. But for now, let's just make this a safe space where we can talk about your feelings and thoughts. And I must just tell you, that is the primary purpose of my life, a safe space to talk about my feelings and my thoughts. And if it's your obsession as well, if you're going to make me your obsession, if your obsession is to talk about my feelings and thoughts, we can be friends as well. And that was really my requirement to be a part of my life, was you needed to make everything about me. So I kind of went on in life. I tried to go to varsity when I finished matric. I kind of went for the first 7 days until I found my tribe. My tribe is always those people who are not taking any responsibility, looking incredibly cool and mysterious outside the gate, smoking weed, doing drugs. That's for me. That's where I've belonged my whole life. That's why I've always found myself to feel as fearless as possible. And that's where I go. And again, dishonesty, it's been the whole way through my life. I mean, my poor parents paid for me to go to varsity. I think it was for 3 years. I only went for a week. What I did was every semester I would just draw up my own report and put in my own marks and submit it to my parents, and they were very proud of me for all of my marks. I did that for 3 years. I pretended to go to varsity for 3 years. And instead what I did every single day was I went to one of my friends and we drank and used for that entire 3 years. Again, until all the consequences, came crashing down on me. Sure. What else? I never really wanted to stop drinking. There were times in my life where I ran out of money and I ran out of resources. So I either ran out of friends to supply me or I ran out of money because I could never keep a job. I couldn't really keep anything going. And like I said, the moment that I put down alcohol, I started to experience things that I thought were the problem and was going to become the focus of my life for the next decade. The moment I put down alcohol and drugs, I started to experience things like depression. I started to experience things like an overwhelming sense of anxiety and fear, sometimes debilitating fear. When I was about 19, I spent an entire year in my room, in my bed. I was so depressed that I could hardly get out of bed. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. So like I said, I would go to psychologists and psychiatrists, and they would say to me, okay, listen, you're suffering from depression, or you're suffering from general anxiety disorder, or PTSD because of how your because of how your childhood was. And then they would put me on a cocktail of antipsychotics, the normal, what do I call it, the standard issue. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and antipsychotic, which I loved. Any medication that ends in PAM, I'm in for. It's what I'm after. But I thought that was the source of all my problems. I thought if we can just get rid of my depression and my anxiety, my life will be okay. And I spent the next 10 years believing that, going from psychiatrist to psychiatrist. Believing that was the root cause of my problems. The problem was, though, every time I went onto medication, something happened to me physically. I kicked off the physical craving. Again, I didn't know that at the time, but I always went back to my drinking and using. Because what the medication did for me is not quite what alcohol and illicit drugs does for me. I mean, it's nice, but alcohol and cocaine is far better. Let's be honest. So I would always go back there, not knowing that I was keeping the physical craving alive. The problem with that was, over the years, I lost more hope, because at about the age of 27, I got to the stage where I was almost completely unemployable. I was rapidly losing my ability to look after my hygiene. I was constantly wearing the same clothes again and again and again, and eventually my work had to let me go. So Josh, we just can't have you here anymore. At that stage, I had no friends. All my friends had kind of carried on with their lives. They had gotten married and settled down, and they were all living like a Cat Stevens song. And I could never get anything going in my life. I could never get any momentum. And I used to hate Facebook, because I would log on to Facebook and everyone was, sharing how happy their lives were, and they'd met someone, or second child, or third promotion, or I don't know, first house or whatever. And I was all alone in my room, drinking with my friend, my disease. And I was beginning, to lose hope. What I didn't know, and it talks about it so well in the big book, about, the loneliness that only the alcoholic knows, was there was just no space in my life for anybody else. You either agreed with my feelings or you agreed with my thoughts, and if you didn't, you were stupid, and that's how I looked at things. I was superior from an intellectual perspective, is certainly how I felt about things, but I was certainly the most clever bum I knew, and the most intelligent homeless person I knew, and the most intelligent jobless person I knew, and the most smartest person with absolutely no friends around that I knew. And there were many times in the last 3 years of my drinking that I just tried to take my life, because I didn't want to be around anymore. The loneliness was certainly something that got to me in my active alcoholism. And there were times where I just took as many sleeping tablets as I could and drank as much as I could, hoping never really to wake up again, I also didn't know it at the time, and I'm so glad the reading, speaks about it. But all I could see, and everything that I've shared now, is how I experienced my life. I didn't even take into account, not for one day, my family and what they were up to, and what their dreams were, and what their desires were, and what they were going through, if anything. I was completely, blinded by the fact that I was living my life only for me. I couldn't see that my mom was driving around constantly looking for me. I came out of treatment, I was about 4 months sober, and my mom shared a story with me that just confirmed how blind I can be. My mom's a school teacher, she teaches English, and she said to me, Josh, when you were 19 and you were living at home with us, as soon as the school bell went at 3 o'clock, all the other school teachers would obviously go to the classroom and go and catch up. As the bell went, I would jump in the car and I would fly home as quickly as possible, because my biggest fear was that if I don't get home quick enough, you're going to die in your bed. You're going to OD. And I used to rush home, because if I get there quick enough and you are dying, at least I'll have some time to get you to hospital. And I didn't even know that. I remember thinking to myself, I can't remember life like that, and that's how I live life in active alcoholism, is I can't see anything. I think the biggest gift that I've gotten from Alcoholics Anonymous is that I'm wrong. I'm wrong about everything. I'm wrong. My perception tells me that life is all about me and that I'm right, and because of that, I can't see anything. I came into treatment, by absolute grace. I tried to take my life for the umpteenth time, and my parents made the decision. They had a difficult decision. They were either going to send me to a psych ward or they were going to send me to a rehab. And the golden thread, my mom taught a guy who shared his story with my mom, and my mom said, "That sounds like my son." And that's how I ended up on the House of the Hill in Scottsboro, and I got introduced to the 12 steps. I wish I could say that I came in and I was just completely 100% defeated and I didn't have any character defects, but that wasn't the case. I remember doing my admission, and the guy that was doing the admission with me, I was just making his life difficult. I went through every single line in that admission. And we got to the point where they said they had nursing staff, and I said, "How do I know you've got nursing staff? I haven't seen them." And he went, "No, well, we've got them." I said, "Well, I want to see her certificates to make sure that she is actually a nurse." And a senior counselor came in and said, "How's the admission going?" And this guy went, "This guy's going to be, a hard work." And the senior counselor went, "Pack your bags. We don't need you. You need us. Goodbye. We'll open up the gates. You can leave." And for the first time in my life, I was so scared that I didn't want to go back to the life that I had come from. I was so frightened to go back to that place that I didn't want to go anywhere. And I went, "No, it's okay. I'll sign." It doesn't matter. But that's what alcohol did for me, is it took away all my options, because I always had options. Anytime anybody confronted me on my behavior or anything that they didn't like about me, I always had somewhere to go. I always had a girlfriend where I could go to. I always had options. I always had somebody who would take me. And in the end, I had nowhere to go. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was too scared. I really was. I was too fearful. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of my journey of starting to live in AA and go to the world every day. Treatment for me, it was probably the most incredible experience of my life, working through the 12 steps, because for the first time in my life, I realized that there are other people in the world that are just like me. I thought I was going to die alone. I had never met anybody else like me up until coming into recovery. And finally, there were people around me sharing their stories. And I remember thinking to myself, I feel just like you, and I think just like you, and I behave just like you. Watching other people get concerned in concern group was one of my greatest gifts, because it wasn't them that was being concerned, it was me. I could identify with everything that was being said by the counselors. I could identify with the person getting concerned. I could identify with their behavior as well, whether they took it on board or whether they were kicking off. I could identify with all the behavior, because that's me, You are all me. And I kind of came into recovery. I didn't know how useless I was until I came into recovery. And it's been the complete opposite to me. Because if you had asked me how capable I am in active alcoholism, I would have told you I'm amazing. I would have told you I'm a restaurateur and a child genius prodigy or some nonsense like that. In recovery, if you've asked me, who I am, I'm just learning. I don't know much. But I didn't know that until I got into recovery, because my first week in recovery, I went to go do shopping, and I sort of had an anxiety attack in the yogurt aisle, because it was all too overwhelming for me, And I kind of thought to myself, like, there's my father, and he's kind of successful, and everyone else is getting on with it, and I've got to phone my sponsor because I'm having a panic attack in the yogurt aisle at Woolworths. And I was just like, this is not okay. It's not who I thought I was. But I had to come to terms with the fact that I'd never lived life sober. For at least, from the age of about 13, I had always had something in me, whether it was a substance or whether I was lying to avoid life. I had always had an altered perception of life. And I had to start right from the beginning. I had to learn how to be a friend. I've had to learn how to be a son. I've had to learn how to be a partner. And I've learned that from everybody in the fellowship. I am because of you guys. Really, everything I've learned is from you guys. And I've had to learn some difficult lessons along the way. I thought that everybody in the rooms is people that want to get better. I thought that, because my journey to the fellowship was, I tried everything, and then the last thing was the rooms for me. So when I came to the rooms, I thought that's everybody's journey. And I came into the rooms, and people were not doing what I thought they should be doing. There were people getting into dishonest relationships that no one knew about except for me. There were people who were not speaking to their sponsors enough, which I picked up on. There were people who wanted to come and say hello and hug me, and I knew they were making a move on me. It wasn't about the hugs. So my first year in recovery, I went around giving everyone lots of spiritual growth. I was telling everybody what to do. You shouldn't do this. You need to stay out of this. You need to put yourself on a comban with everyone. You need to leave her, get out of the relationship. I had opinions on everybody's recovery. And it's amazing, though, because in my first month of recovery, I think I got invited to like 4 briars a month. And then in my third month of recovery, it was like 2 briars a month. And then in my 6 months of recovery, it was like 1 briar a month. And then eventually, at the end of my first year of recovery, I didn't get invited to any briars. Nobody was inviting me around. And it was because I was sticking with the winners. So I thought, I just ran out of winners. So eventually I had to go to the other side. Thank God for people in recovery, because somebody sat me down and went, Josh, you're an arsehole. Which I was highly offended by. But I had to realize that, because at the end of my first year of recovery, that old feeling of loneliness sort of started to come back. It's taken me a long time in my recovery to realize that what the majority of recovery is about is relationships. It's about my ability to connect with the people around me, and how important that is. So after that, I had to make amends. At the end of my first year, I had to make amends. I made a day of it. That's how many people. I sat down at the Bell and Anchor, and I'd set up appointments, one from 8 till 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, and I just had people coming all day saying, I'm incredibly sorry for telling you how to live your life. And I made my amends. And there's someone here today that I forgot to make amends to, because I couldn't see my part. I didn't think there was anything wrong with what I'd done, because that's That's how the disease of alcoholism works, is I can't see anything. I can't see your hurt. I just can't see it because I'm so busy focusing on me. And I apologize if I never made my amends to Candace. So I'm making my amends now. My recovery, sure. My recovery's been incredible. The sum of my recovery has got to be just coming down here for the weekend. I've come down here in a car that's not dying of alcoholism. It has a license disc. I've got a license. The tires are not about to fall off. There's a spare wheel that I haven't sold. And I'm paying for monthly through the job that I have kept for the last 8 years. In my recovery, everything has sort of found me. Everything has found me. In active alcoholism, like a typical alcoholic, there was always somewhere for me to be. Like all the newcomers, now there's somewhere for me to be. There's nowhere for you to be. No, don't worry about it. And in my recovery, everything has sort of found me. And I was at an AA function of an old timer, and I happened to meet somebody that I fell in love with 2 years into sobriety. Just throwing that out there. 2 years. And I'm so glad that because I wouldn't only follow instructions, I would, it's just that I was so desperate to get sober. So if my sponsor said you can't get into recovery for a year, I took it as, 2 years. Because I was desperate to never be that guy ever again. And I met that's where I met Katie, and we've been together now 7 years, and we're engaged to be married. And I must just tell you, that's only possible because of you. It's only possible because how my relationships end is legally. That's how my relationships end. Because it ends with her having to get the law involved and get an harassment order put on me, and I can never see her. Our love is lost that way. That's how my relationships end. So that's the best that I can do. And I kind of sit here today, and we've been together for 7 years. And I must just tell you, that's only because of everybody here. And I'll give you an example, because in the beginning of our relationship, because she lived in the UK and I lived here, and the only phone I could afford was some cheap standard issue, and Katie wanted to buy me I can't remember, but it was a phone that had FaceTime on it, because we wanted to talk often, and she sent me a message to go, hey Josh, for your birthday I'd like to buy you a phone. And I was appalled at that. I thought, I will not be bought. It's not how I do things, because I know how that game works. Because you buy me a phone and then I got to buy you something back, and I know those games so well, and I don't play games in recovery anymore. Thank God for my sponsor and the people around me, because I phoned my sponsor and he just, your sponsor will laugh at you a lot. Like my sponsor did. And I phoned my sponsor and I gave him all of my insanity. This is what's going on for me. She wants to buy me. I'm not for sale. I'm not an object. And he said to me, Josh, just accept the gift with grace. Just accept the gift with grace. It's a nice gift. I'm sure she's doing it so that she can chat to you and you guys can chat to one another. I was like, okay, I can do that. That I can do. And that's how the program works for me, is I give all of my insanity to my poor sponsor, and he gives me the option to respond sanely to the world. And because of that, the world's gotten to see, for the majority of my recovery at least, the sanest possible Josh available. the ones closest to me in recovery, my friends and sponsor, yeah, they get to see all of the insanity, as they should, because I give it to them. I give it to them. I never thought that I needed to give any of my thoughts and feelings away, because I thought that those were the most important things in my life. And I've realized today they are the least important things in my life, is my feelings and my thoughts. The most important things in my life today is this weekend. Because like I said, I came down in my car with my fiance. There's no legal issues going on between us. I've got a dog that I love and adore. We've got 2 stepkids, Layla and Lucy, who, who are just incredible. Lucy, the younger, said something to me that I've never been accused of ever in my entire life. She said, Josh, you always try and do the right thing. And I was like, well, I've been accused of many things in my life before, but I've never been accused of that. And that's only because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that stuff like that happens. I got to stay with friends who invited me into their house, which is incredible, and I'm eternally grateful for all of my friends in recovery. A lot of my sponsees have become my friends as well. I came down this weekend and I did a step 5 with someone who was struggling with a few things. And it's incredible though, because I always thought that my greatest asset was like, I don't know, my intellect. I shudder to say that word these days, but my intellect or something. And it's incredible though, because what makes me useful today is all of my character defects. And what I mean by that is I get to share all the mistakes that I've made with another alcoholic, and in that we find God. And I never knew that's how you live life. I never knew that. I always thought that that's the last thing that you do, that you must hide that at all costs and share with the world everything you wish them to see. And every time I do a step 5 with a sponsee or a newcomer, I'm always reminded of that. And I'm eternally grateful for my sponsees. If you want spiritual growth, get a sponsee, because they'll ask, listen, do as they want. Which I love. It's just that sponsorship in a nutshell. I'll finish off now. I'm just I'm happy, and that's not something I've ever been able to say without a sickening feeling in my stomach, because every time I used to say things like I'm happy, I'd always sort of end up crying. You know what I mean? It's because it wasn't congruent and it wasn't true with my spiritual insights. My relationships with my family, some of them are good, some of them are not great. The amount of damage that I did to my family in active alcoholism was so irreparable that the majority of my family have still not spoken to me in almost 9 years. That's how much I damaged those relationships. And I always share this because it's my truth. And I share this because I know that me doing the next right thing is always the right thing to do, because that's just been how my recovery has been. And unknowingly, my brother is certainly one of us. He's certainly one of us, and he's currently earning his step 1 stripes now. He's on the medication train, zombifying his way towards a rock bottom. And it's so incredible to see, because, I'm starting to get an understanding of what it must have been like for my family to see me, because I get to watch my brother what's the right words? Fade away in alcoholism, and he's becoming less and less and less himself, and less and less and less able to talk and communicate, and he's being imprisoned by his own feelings and thoughts, and it's horrendous to see. And I know now that that's how my family watched me. they must have seen me just completely fade away. And I guess my hope not only for my brother, but my hope for every alcoholic is what was given so freely to me. Because the moment that the 12 steps, or the moment that the opportunity for me to get out of that place was given to me, I grabbed it and ran. I grabbed it and ran. And again, I owe all of that to everybody in the fellowship who carried me through that. I need you to keep me sane. I need you to keep me learning how to deal with life on life's terms. And again, for that, I'm eternally grateful. So thanks for letting me share. Thank you.
Thanks.